Welcome everybody to the New Jersey Youth Soccer Legends Series. Today we have a special guest, Bill Gazonas. Bill Gazonas grew up playing soccer in New Jersey in the 70s, grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, went to university at Hartwick University, Hermann Trophy winner, played in the NASL, having a pro career that spanned from 1978 to 1984. Respected player in the area, one of the greats from that era, Bill Gazonas. Welcome.
Thank you, James.
You're welcome. So, Bill, let's talk a little bit about your upbringing. You're obviously of a Greek background. How did your family come here?
My family came here. My grandfather on my father's side, he had come to Norristown, Pennsylvania in like around 1910 or so, and he worked here, saved his money. Then he went back to Greece to bring my grandmother and my father and two siblings. But what happened is at that time, the United States wasn't taking any more citizens from Greece. So my grandfather took the family, they took a boat to Argentina. They spent, I think, about 3 months in Buenos Aires. My grandfather was able to get, let's say, the passports changed. So it showed as if they were all born in Argentina. And then they took a boat from Argentina to the United States. And then on my mother's side, my grandfather was very young. He was working on a boat. He got into New York. He jumped off the boat, and he eventually became a citizen also.
All right. And then your dad obviously married your mom. And what happened? They bought a house in Trenton?
Had a house in Trenton. In 1940, my grandfather had bought a luncheonette on the corner of Hamilton Avenue and Chambers Street, which was directly across the street from Trenton High School. 6 months later, he passed away. So my father, James Gazones, and my uncle, George Gazones, they pretty much had to give up going to college. They served in World War II. They came back, and they had the luncheonette from 1940 to 1986 when they retired.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So you grew up in Trenton. How did you get involved in soccer?
Soccer was very popular in Trenton, James, but my best friend, Denny Kanivi, his family had played soccer forever, and he was on a Little League team from 6 years old. I used to play with them in the park, but I didn't join organized soccer until I was 12 years old.
Okay, so you used to just play on the street?
Yes.
And was that all pickup games or?
Yeah, just you know what, in the street or at the park. It was soccer season. We played soccer. Yes.
Did you used to practice on your own?
When I was younger, no, because at that point I played soccer, I played baseball, and I played basketball. So in those seasons, I played the particular sport.
Yeah. So this is part of the questions that I have for you. So back then there was just one season, one sport. Is that how it was?
You know, James, pretty much in the fall you played soccer. It wasn't like it now where there's tons of tournaments in the summer or the holidays. There's long weekends where teams can go travel and play in these tournaments. It was pretty much specifically in those seasons, yes.
So the fall season was like kind of how it is now, September to November? Correct. And obviously you have a daughter that's played now or played recently, correct?
Yes.
And what's the difference between the level of players that you saw back in the day compared to the kids of today?
I think the players, obviously, I think if you look at all the sports, they're bigger athletes in general. I wouldn't say they're better athletes. They're bigger. I would think maybe they're faster. Technically, James, like I said, at that time, Trenton, New Jersey, and still New Jersey is a powerhouse for producing great players. But at that time, North Jersey, like Kearney and Harrison and Newark and Trenton, produced a lot of great players. So I don't know, from my perspective, if the players were much better then, but now, of course, like looking at my daughter, they play so much more. You're basically focusing on one sport at a much earlier age.
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to say, you feel like the players back then were more like street savvy?
It was very different, James. Growing up, yes, because as I got older, if you played for, say, the men's team, even though you were 17 years old or 16 years old, a lot of times the team I played for, Trenton Extension, we would go to tournaments, and we would be the only American players there, period. So we could play in some Sunday tournament or weekend tournament in North Jersey, and there could be almost every ethnic background, and we were the only Americans. So we got exposed to the different styles of play from those different teams, and I think it was a great learning experience.
That's interesting, because that's how I grew up too. In Australia, every team was an ethnic background. So you used to play against Italians that were, more defensive, and then you had the South Americans that were more trickery, and the Germans that were more methodical. Is that correct?
You nailed it, James. Yes.
All right. Yeah, that I feel like that helped me grow, not only as a player but also as a coach, being where we had to play a different way every week we played. It wasn't like it was the same style over and over again.
You know what, James? I think for me, especially when I got older and got to play with the men's team when I was still, like, say, 17 or 18, and you played against some foreign guy that was an ex-professional player, and you know what? They didn't care. They were playing to win, and games would get nasty, and you learned how to protect yourself, with off the ball incidents, and of course, you watched them and you took the good parts of their game, and technically they're very good, and maybe the next day you went out and you saw something, and you went out in your backyard or the field and you tried it, and you started practicing that repetition of skill.
Yeah. So going back to that era a little bit, very dirty game, correct? The sportsmanship level was very low. Would you say that?
As I got older, yes, especially when you play with the adults, it could be very nasty. Yes.
Yeah. So Bill, you said you played the multiple sports, and you did them seasonally. When did you take soccer really serious and say, hey, this is what I want to do?
Going into my junior year in high school, I went to the Broncos soccer camp, and Manfred Shellscheit was the head instructor, and Charles Ping Pong Faruda was, say, second in command. And after spending a week with them and watching Manfred get in front of the camp every morning and display a different technical skill, I absolutely just fell in love with the game and kind of realized the game's about skill and creativity and all these beautiful things. And that was it. My focus was 100% on soccer every minute thereafter.
And from that point on, you went home, and did you start practicing on your own, or was it still just street ball?
I did both, James. I literally, other than my spare time going to school and doing whatever time I needed for homework, I would practice if I had a friend to practice with. If not, I used to go on my own, which I call secret training, and just practice just constantly.
How old were you when the switch went off?
16 years old.
So 16 is when you said, I love this, and that's when this camp took place?
Yes, going into my junior year in high school.
So at that stage, Bill, were you behind everybody?
I think say I wasn't a bad player, James, but say the kids in St. Louis that were playing 10 months out of the year, and the foreign kids, or the Scottish American kids from Kearney that were playing 10, 11, 12 months. And yeah, I was behind. Yes.
So you you fell in love with it. You said, this is what I want to do. Every spare minute of every day, you just started clocking in the hours. Was this something that was instilled in you from before, or was that just because you knew that I need to catch up?
James, for as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a professional athlete. That was it. First, it was baseball. And then I fell in love with basketball. And even though I wasn't very good and was very short, I figured out if I grew 3 inches a year till I was a senior in college, I'd be 6'2", be tall enough to play in the NBA. So to answer your question, and then I fell in love with soccer. So that was ingrained in me, and I was just obsessed with it then.
Did you have any idols growing up?
Pele was for sure an idol. As I got a little older and I got exposed to more players, I loved Beckenbauer, Johan Cruyff, who I don't think gets the credit as one of the top players ever. But it was different then, James. We didn't get to see top soccer players on TV every day like the players now. The first time I got to see a World Cup was the 1970 World Cup, but that was my junior year in high school, which was probably like 1972 on a film. So that was the first time I actually saw great international players.
Yeah, I was having a discussion with somebody the other day, and they were even talking back to 1990s, how little soccer there was on TV. When you were growing up, was there absolutely like none?
There was the predecessor to the NASL. They had a little National Professional Soccer League or something, but it was very rarely games, and the level wasn't. I almost get jealous that the youth players now, they can turn on a TV and see the greatest players in the world in the greatest leagues every Saturday, Sunday, midweek. It's just terrific for them.
Yeah. So Hartwick College, how did that come about? How did you get recruited for Hartwick?
Well, James, I really didn't. I went up and visited this. In the state championship game, I hurt my knee, and I was out for 3-4 months. Well, Timo Liakowski was the head coach at Hartwick. He came down to New Jersey in the spring to see some players, and it was my first game back. He saw me, and basically he told me I wasn't good enough to play there. I should go anywhere else, is what he told me. But in spite of that, I had gone up to visit the school. I saw an indoor training session at night one day, and the intensity was so unbelievable, I decided that's where I was going to go no matter what.
And he recruited you?
No, he told me to go elsewhere, but he was nice enough. I was friends with Glenn Meyernick and Art Napolitano, 2 of his blue chip recruits. So he let me attend preseason camp.
And then you made a good positive impression, and then you slowly started to creep into the lineup?
Well, you know what, James? He didn't give me the time of day in preseason. I would get in 5 minutes if I was lucky. At the end of preseason camp, he basically went through every player, and he got to me and he said, I don't see you ever playing on the varsity. And then he hesitated. He said, but I'll give you the choice. You can either stay on the varsity and you're not going to play, or you can go to the junior varsity. And I said, no, I'll stay on the varsity. So I went on the varsity. Our first game was at Montclair, and Manfred Schultz, who was also the state coach, was the coach there. So it was the only game my parents were going to see. And I figured, even though he told me I wasn't going to play, I was playing good in training, and every preseason game I would get in for 5 minutes. So long story short, we ended up winning the game 1-0. And James, I was the only player not to get into the game. I said goodbye to kissed my parents goodbye, went back at the bus, my eyes filled with tears. I was so humiliated, you can't imagine. This Jim Harrison sat back there with me, scored the winning goal, and he said, you know what, a lot of good players haven't gotten a fair shake, you should transfer. We got back to Oneonta that night, James. All the players went downtown. I got my soccer ball, I went to the park, and I just had such energy. I trained for like 3 hours under a street light. I wasn't going to allow it. And long story short, Jane, the next game we played Penn State, and they blow us out, and one of their players really tore it up. And I had played against them in a couple Sunday tournaments in Trenton. So one of the midfielders quit on a Monday, and I went into Timo's office and basically told him I should be playing, I should be starting. And it's not, I don't think what he expected. He basically looked at me after 10 seconds of not saying anything and said, can you mark Tim Hunter? He's one of the best players on UConn. And I told him, I've never seen him play, but I'm sure I can. And that's how I got my start into the team.
Okay. So from that point on, you were playing and you started playing every minute of every game, or were you coming on and off the bench?
You know what, James? I was playing every game, and then I got hurt, and I had to sit out a game. And then when we got to the final game of the regular season, which we needed to win, he didn't start me, and I was out for like 10 days. I was a little disappointed, but he finally put me back in about 15 minutes into the game. And then I was in the team. But having said that, James, Timo had a lot of recruits coming in, and the next year he basically I played a little bit of in left back position also. He told me if I was going to start my sophomore year, it would have to be at the left back position.
So you started as a left back, and then you moved up the field from there.
Well, I was playing very good at the left back position, but I wanted to midfielder. If I ever was going to have a future in soccer, it would be in the midfield. And I didn't get a sniff in the midfield till the end of the regular season, when we already qualified for the tournament. We were playing Penn State, and we had a couple of players who were injured and a couple of players who had to stay home for exams, because it was basically a meaningless game till the tournament started. So Timo took Glenn Mucci-Marnick, who was our best player, from the central midfield position, and he put him in the sweeper position. And he actually he told me for this game, I want to play central midfield. And we had a lot of changes in the midfield. So I basically went, when he told me that, I just knew I had to play so good that I would make up his mind for him that this should be the change. And we had a great game. And then I became the central midfield for Hartwick, and then things really went from there.
So you played as a defensive mid, attacking mid, or kind of in between? It sounds like you were probably a blue collar type of worker in there. Is that fair?
No, well, no, you know what, James? Although I played left back, I think of myself as a skillful, clever midfielder. I was good defensively, but James, I wasn't the biggest guy in the world, and I wasn't like physically one of those real strong guys. In Hartwick, the central midfielder ran the show. So basically I was the midfield general, but I had players out wide of me on each side that were very good at running at players. So it made sense for more to me to be in a deeper position and receive balls and string passes together from that position.
So was that a 4-3-3 formation with the three midfielders flat and out wide? So
yes.
You were in a midfield, the left and the right midfield were really stretched out almost on the line, right?
Yes, and we played with two traditional wingers and a striker centrally located.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the Hermann Trophy, you won the Hermann Trophy, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you went from, the coach telling you that you're not going to play and you should transfer, and crying in the back of the bus, to taking your soccer ball and letting out all your frustration on your own, to confronting the coach and telling him basically I should be playing, to eventually winning the Hermann Trophy. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know what, James? I was fortunate that I had a mentor that, as I mentioned earlier, James Ping Pong Ferruto. So in the summer, literally Monday through Friday, he would come to my house at 9 o'clock. Say my mother would make breakfast for us. We'd leave at 9:30. We'd go to this Nottingham or Rider College, and we would train. A lot of times we would just meet him. Sometimes a third or fourth player. We would train till 3:30. And I mean, other than taking 15 minutes for water break and something to eat real quick, we just trained, and it was all focused on technical skills and improving my vision and thinking ahead. Ping pong felt being one play ahead wasn't good enough. Your mind had to be 2 or 3 plays ahead. So I would train for that, and then I'd go home, and then Trenton, like I said, back then soccer was very popular. I'd go back to Nottingham at night, and we'd have a pickup game at Nottingham, and it could be it could be 15 people, it could be 30 people. We play a short-sided game, shirts versus skins. And then I would come home and I had a pendulum ball on the clothesline and I would practice my heading for 15 minutes. And I did that Monday through Friday, every day. Saturday and Sunday, I would go to the Nottingham by myself. They had a big wall and I would practice 6-7 hours a day. At Hartwick in the winter, I would go in a racquetball court and train for a minimum of 2 hours every day by myself, all on technical work and creating great vision and thinking ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that comes up a lot in these interviews that I'm doing is the imagination piece, where people are, you know, a lot of great players practice on their own, but they imagine there's people around them, and they're dropping shoulders and dipping and taking people on that really aren't there. They're just in their imagination. How much of that did you do?
James, I believe that when you practice, you have to practice as if you're playing in a real game. So whatever the setting was, yes, I like 100%. I didn't go through the motions. I only practiced things that I could use in the game and I could benefit from. And like I said, it was all on technical skills and creating great vision, thinking ahead. You know, that I think that speed of thought is just so important.
All right, so Hermann Trophy, amazing accomplishment. From there, Tulsa Roughnecks, NASL, correct?
Yes.
How was that experience?
You know what, James? Looking back, I shouldn't have went there. I'm going to tell you why. Not because that Tulsa is not a nice city, because the team was predominantly English and they played on a very narrow crowned AstroTurf field. And for me, I was never comfortable on AstroTurf, and my skill was more suited to teams that played more possession soccer, whether it was a German-oriented team or a Spanish-oriented team. The English version getting whiplash in the midfield from watching balls go over my head, it wasn't suited to my style of play.
Yeah, I understand that. That's an important piece, and something that I try to advise my players now when they're picking a college. You know, pick a college that suits your style, because you know some teams they play direct, and I know back then the English style was direct. You know, get it long and the good old flick on, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they've changed, but yeah, back then it was, yes.
Yeah, the tall striker partnered up with the little striker, where we play along to the tall striker who flicks it on to the little guy, right?
Exactly, James. Yes.
So what happened from there? You just you played your games and you left, and then you went to indoor soccer, right?
Well, I went 1 year. I went to Calgary in the NASL, and the team was predominantly first division German players, which was then West Germany, and the first division was the Bundesliga, and that was a very talented team we had. The team ended up financially went bankrupt after a year. So then I went to the New York Arrows, who were the defending MISL champs. I went to them.
Okay. And then you played indoor soccer for a number of years, correct?
Yeah, the major indoor soccer, yes.
And how was that experience?
The New York Arrows, we were a very talented team. We had a lot of, back then, of course, it was Yugoslavia, so I'm not going to break down the different countries they are now. We had a lot of players from Yugoslavia, and I think you know, James, the Yugoslavians are very technically strong, and we had some Spanish players and some American players. We were a terrific team.
Yeah, I remember growing up, the Yugoslavians were labeled the Brazilians of Europe. They were fantastic soccer players, no doubt. So let me ask you some quick questions here, and we're going to wrap this thing up. Obviously, you had an opportunity to watch a lot of players over your time, including the current crop of players. Who's the best player that you've ever seen? And I don't mean played against, that you've ever seen on TV, the best player that you've seen.
In the world?
Yeah.
I would say, boy, it's tough, James. I mean, Maradona and Messi are so tight, and I think Johan Cruyff was phenomenal. Pelé, I saw more towards the end of his career, so I would say Maradona and Messi with Cruyff right there.
Yeah, yeah. What about team? What's the best team you've ever seen?
Well, the 70 Brazilian team I saw was brilliant, but the game was different then, right, James? In 74, it changed where tactically everybody got behind the ball, but before that, it was a slower pace. They were just a brilliant team. I think the Dutch team that lost the 74 World Cup was brilliant. If they don't play in Germany, I think they win the World Cup, and then 4 years later, if the game's not in Argentina, they win again.
Yeah, so the Dutch team of the 70s, you think, is the best team you've seen?
Yes.
Nice, nice, nice. First pro game you ever went to?
The first I saw when I was in was high school, I think. It was an exhibition game. It was was it Lazio or Roma, versus Santos, and it was in Jersey City.
Okay, Santos, and did was Pelé playing for him at the time?
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. What a great first game to watch.
Yeah.
Favorite stadium you ever played in?
The favorite stadium I would say would be Giant Stadium, James, because it was close to home. And the 1 year Tulsa, we played the Cosmos. It was a playoff game, so it was 77,691 fans. And I used to get on the field with a press pass. So I can remember like just looking around and thinking I've come a long way that I'm from a press pass to I'm actually playing in the game.
All right. Most memorable game you've played in?
Our national championship game.
And that was college ball, right?
Yes.
And your hardest ever opponent?
Johan Cruyff.
Yeah, how about that? That's awesome. Not many people can say that. Best coach you ever had?
James, if I answer that question, I'm going to insult someone. It's a tough one.
Don't answer it then. I understand. All right, then finally, your advice to a young player that's about to embark on their soccer journey.
James, I think there's two things they should focus on. They want to have great technical skills, and they want to have great vision, being awareness, training your brain to think 2, 3, 4 plays ahead, and then you get that speed of thought. I would focus on those two areas.
So technical skills, being efficient with the ball, having creativity, and then looking ahead. I like the looking ahead thing. I think it's something that's missing.
I agree 1,000%. I just think it's so important, and it's not talked about enough for the players. And they can incorporate that every day they train, whether they're alone, with their friends, or in a team setting.
Excellent. And Bill, you've got a book out. Do you want to talk a little bit about the book?
I'd love to, James. The book's called That Little Son of a B******. I don't like to use the word because some people think I play with a chip on my shoulder. It pretty much, James, has to do with my my time at college, pretty much going from my first game where, I'm in the back of the bus, humiliated in tears, and my journey through college soccer and my club teams, getting to the national championship and winning the national championship in my last state game, captaining Hartwick to the national championship. And, I won a lot of individual awards, but winning the national championship was by far the most special thing for me. And a lot, I talk about training in there and different things I used to do with ping pong or things that Manfred had talked about. So there's that training aspect for young players. And it's trying to inspire people to believe in themselves, people that were told they're not good enough. And no matter who tells you that, you don't have to let a coach define you as a player, and I'd say reach for the stars.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to my copy. I hope you know that.
James, I sent it out Tuesday, and actually, I can't believe it. I should have just drove it to you because you're like 30 minutes away, and it shows it's coming today. So hopefully you get it today.
All right, good. Well, listen, Bill, thank you so much for coming on. A lot of respect to you. I know you grew up in a different era. Your story is definitely amazing. You know, just littered with perseverance, obviously. Very inspirational stuff. I'm sure the audience that listens to this will get a lot of valuable information that will push them. You sound like an underdog. We all love underdog stories. Thanks for coming on. Much respect to you.
Thank you, James. I truly appreciate it. Anytime.
Thanks, Bill.